To return to our discussion of poetic meter, there are a number of different ways we can represent the meter in English poetry. I'm going to use these symbols because these are also the symbols we're going to use in classical poetry, although we'll see that they're used a little differently there. But we were talking about an iamb in English, which is a foot consisting of an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. If we use this symbol called a breve, it looks like a shallow little u to represent the unstressed syllable, and we can use the familiar macron to represent a stressed syllable. So, for instance, what's called a trochee would be the opposite of an iamb, a stressed followed by an unstressed syllable. Now, when we describe poetic meter, we have there are two parts to the name, the formal name. The first kind tells us what kind of feet. For instance, if you look underneath, we have the unstressed followed by a stressed, 5 iambs. And so it's iambic because our basic measure here is the iamb, and there are 5 feet. So again, penta means 5 in Greek, and meter comes from the Greek word that means measure. So there are 5 measures, 5 feet in the line, iambic pentameter. And this has been a standard meter that's been used a lot in modern poetry, not just in English poetry, but also in Italian poetry. The sonnet is based on a 14-line poem of iambic pentameter, following a certain rhyme scheme. We also see it in Shakespeare. Most of the dialogue, not all, but most of the dialogue of most of his plays is in iambic pentameter. For instance, this line from the play Julius Caesar, Act 1, Scene 1, "You blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things." If we scan it, that is, break it down according to the meter, and really kind of emphasize the syllables, you blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things. Again, you're not going to say it with that much emphasis when you're doing it as part of a play, but you can hear the rhythm and less obviously in the regular spoken voice. Also, this is from a long poem in iambic pentameter, John Milton's Paradise Lost, which is really an epic poem, modeled in some ways on the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid, written in English in unrhymed iambic pentameter back in the 17th century. And listen to how this sounds. "And arms not worse and foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war." And again, with the emphasis, you can hear the iambs, "and arms not worse and foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war," right? So that's iambic pentameter. So again, modern poetry, stressed and unstressed syllables. We call that qualitative meter because it measures, there's a difference in the way the syllables sound. The quality is different. They receive more stress. As we start taking a look at classical poetry, ancient Greek and ancient Roman poetry, the meter is not based on stress. It's called quantitative meter. And so the measures, the feet, are patterns of long and short syllables. Now we'll see the terminology we use for our modern stress-based meter comes from the Greek. We use the same words, but mean something a little different. So quantitative meter, again, we said it's based on long and short. What that really means, and again, we talk about long vowels and short vowels in English, it's a qualitative measure. It's quantitative. It tells you as a measure of how much time it takes to say each syllable. If you're familiar with music, it's like the difference between a whole note and a half note. A whole note equals 2 half notes. They take the same amount of time if you're singing or playing music. Likewise, in quantitative meter, as we're going to see with Virgil's Aeneid, a long syllable takes you twice as much time as 2 shorts, or you can say 2 shorts equal 1 long, and vice versa. So when we apply this to Virgil's Aeneid, and he uses the same meter, the epic meter in the ancient world, dactylic hexameter, which is the same meter Homer uses in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and is based, as you would guess by the word dactylic, on dactyls. Their basic meter is a dactyl. And in our next lesson, we'll talk about how dactylic hexameter works in Virgil's Aeneid.